Welcome, travelers. We're aware that your journey was difficult, but prepare to have your questions answered, for you have been granted an audience with the Masters of Modern.
And welcome back to Masters of Modern. I am your host, Alex Kessler, here with my co-host, Michael Grothy.
Hello.
Ben's not here today because he's at Blaine's Retailers. It's in the middle of the country somewhere. If you like Blaine's, give them a shout out. Tell them to buy Kess products. We are talking about a bunch of new Magic content. We're a Master of Modern podcast. We are going to be talking about there's just been a bunch of announcements today and yesterday.
Yeah, it was a really big day for announcements.
They moved announcement day to today. It's a little weird because like in the middle of them hyping me getting hyped for Eldraine, I'm now hyped about Return to Zendikar. And
yeah, I was watching the preview stream and it started off with like them slowly like baking gingerbread cookies and frosting them with a timer. And then when the timer ran out, then it was like Jimmy and Mark Rosewater and Cynthia Shepard, who was like the world building lead. And then they like talked about Eldraine. And then in the middle of them talking about Eldraine, they're like, oh yeah, by the way, we're going back to Theros and Zendikar and there's a new plane and Core 2021 is about Teferi. And it's like, whoa, slow down, guys. And then at the end of the preview stream, they're like, by the way, you can play Brawl on Arena right now.
right. So
it was a lot.
So a lot happened. Now, technically, previews don't start till next week. In fact, tune in Monday morning because our preview episode comes out then.
Is it a spicy one?
It's spicy. There's spice.
I'm excited. I'm excited for the
I guess
spice.
now spice actually could mean anything. That spiciness was not a reference to rules mechanics. I don't
Or was it?
We don't know. We don't know. You don't know. I know. But we can't confirm or deny either of those things.
We can't confirm or deny the literal spiciness of the card, but in a figurative sense,
yes,
it's a spicy
one. Spicy in the like internet terminology, like spice emoji. Like, but not necessarily, like it's not a spiced pie, which can now exist in Magic. So speaking of which, today we're going to be going over the different mechanics that we now know are in Throne of Eldraine. And I think we know all the mechanics, right?
Yeah, they did the mechanics article.
They did the mechanics article today. So we know what mechanics are included. We're going to be going all over those. We're going to go over some of the preview cards that have been released that we're excited about. There's some Planeswalkers. There's a return of a big Shrek-esque Planeswalker that we've been missing for a long time. We have lots of memes to talk about. We also have all the new sets to talk about. We began some of that. And in the meantime, I'm going to do some shout-outs. Time to shout out. First one, make sure to follow us on Twitter. I am at Kess Wiley.
I'm at Dudard, D-U-D-A-R-D-D.
It's 2 Ds in the end, not in the middle, which I mess up sometimes. And I am
a total of 4 Ds.
Yeah.
Maximum Ds. No, there could be one more D.
And then don't forget
D-A-R-D-D. Don't do that. And then we are at the MMcast, the podcast. Make sure to follow Ben at Ben Bateman Media. Marshall?
Follow me at Marsh Unfocused.
Cool. Make sure to also subscribe on the YouTube channel. If you're on YouTube right now, hit the like button. Also the subscribe button. But the like button apparently is really important now. We're learning things as we go. YouTube channel.
Subscribe, hit the bell.
All those things. But like first. And comment your what food you hope you get to see on a
We also
Eldraine card.
We also do hitting the bell is important because we do live streams and we try and announce them ahead of time, but sometimes it's relatively short notice. If you have the YouTube notifications on, then you'll be able to know when we do a live stream.
Yeah, which is a useful reason to press that button, and not just a helpful.
We're going to try and do live streams more often. It's just schedules and the practicality of doing it live.
Some of the practicality of doing it live, also technology has gotten better and it is now a little bit easier for us than it used to be. So expect more live things.
But yeah, until we have a regular schedule down for live things, hit the bell and then you'll get notified.
Can I live stream cooking food now? Is that now Magic related enough for YouTube since food is now a thing?
As long as you gain 3 life after you cook it.
Well, I have to eat it too. I have to pay 2 mana.
Well, you just have to sacrifice it.
And pay 2
Technically,
mana.
if you threw it away and paid 2 mana, you still gain 3 life.
But you have to pay 2 mana.
I really appreciate that there's an egg in this set that is an egg.
We found a dropped egg at Ralph's just on the floor, and I took a picture.
Well, the egg, so the golden egg, it like has the food ability because it's food, but it also kind of has a treasure ability.
And it actually kind of has a clue ability also.
I mean, it's basically...
It cantrips when you play it. You can sacrifice it for mana, and it's also food.
I just love that those types of artifacts that can be sacrificed for mana and replace themselves by drawing a card have always been called eggs because of the egg cycle from Odyssey, and now we finally have one again that is an egg. It's
Well, yeah, they were originally eggs.
It's the
right?
purest egg.
right. It was like dark water egg and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, the purest form of an egg. So this, hopefully the card was showing on the video version. For those who don't know, there's a new card for, I think, 2 mana in enters play. You draw a card. Then you can pay 1 mana, sacrifice it to create a mana of any color. Or you can pay 2 mana, sacrifice it to gain 3 life. So it
is a food. It's an artifact food,
so
which is a new artifact type.
New artifact types. Let's do that now. We'll talk about Patreon later, but donate to it. You could be the 69th patron. We're at 68 right now. You could be 69. This is
Seize your destiny. Be our 69th Patreon.
And then we need to also get to 420 after that. It's really, there's a lot that has to happen.
187,
What?
187.
187?
187 is the cop code for murder, but also 187 has been magic slang for creatures with enter the battlefield abilities.
Yeah, that's true.
When that was new technology in Mirage, they referred to those as 187 creatures, like Uktabi Orangutan and Manowar.
Necrotal.
Necrotal. Those 3 were the original pantheon of 187 creatures.
Okay. Magic lesson for all of you guys. All right, so let's talk about food. So there's a mechanic called food. Really, it's a token type that a bunch of things make and use. Food are like clue tokens or treasure tokens. Previously, the Planeswalker that was first previewed literally just had +2 food, make 1.
Yeah, create 1 food.
Didn't explain what it was.
Comma, make 1.
And was really excited about it. They do the most obvious thing. I think like right now, the main thing missing from these like token mechanics is damage, right? We don't have like a bot. We have landmines somewhere. There's the landmine goblin.
Yeah.
But they just did damage to a creature.
It was like whenever a creature attacked you, you like flipped a coin, and if you got heads, then you dealt 2 damage to it or something.
Yeah,
like
I could
that.
see in the future they could have something that's like an exploding potion or something, and so potion tokens
like
or something.
bomb tokens, right? Just like
Right.
3 damage, blow a thing up. But food exists. It's great.
But yeah, so it's a
most of the
token.
flavor.
Did we say what it does? It's you pay 2 and tap it, sacrifice, gain 3 life.
Yes, it is the
That's
most.
what food does. So when something makes a food token, it makes that. We've seen a few cards that make food tokens. The one that's probably most relevant for Modern is Oko the Planeswalker, which is a 3 mana Planeswalker, costs 1 green blue. Let's see if I can do this from memory because I'm not looking at a screen. It's it's got +2, create a food token. Then it's got -1. +1, that's
Yeah.
right.
It's nuts.
+1, target non-land permanent becomes a
Target artifact or creature.
target artifact or creature becomes a 3/3 elk with no abilities. And that's permanent. So you can do it to your opponent's permanents to make them worse. You can do it to your food that you just made to make it better. And then his ultimate is at 5, and
Minus
it's
5.
-5. It's +5. It's -5.
Planeswalkers are weird now.
I guess it's -5. You can exchange control of a permanent you control,
Artifact or creature you control.
artifact or creature you control with a creature an opponent controls with power 3 or less. So you can take their small creatures. So the reason this is modern relevant is because it's a 3 mana Planeswalker.
Also, it's 4 loyalty. So something relevant on that
I
is
said
that
4 loyalty at the beginning.
Did you? Okay, so it can +2 the turn you play a food, and then minus the next turn. The Planeswalker would stay alive, and you get to exchange that food for something.
Right. So you can make a 3/3 if you want to put pressure on your opponent and they're not doing anything relevant.
Or protect your Planeswalker.
You can steal or protect your Planeswalker. Or you can steal one of their creatures and give them this food that's basically worthless because you have to pay 2 mana to gain 3 life, which is terrible.
Yeah.
And so you're playing this in a deck where you don't necessarily care about your opponent's life total. Like this would be a bad card in a burn deck, assuming you could make the mana work, because
Rug burn.
you don't want
do
your
rug
opponent
burn.
to have.
You could do like a Delver with like a Kiln Fiend Brug, right? That's like kind of
Sure, but you don't care about Kiln
You're
Fiend
not
doesn't
gonna-
care about your opponent's life total.
You're not going to play Oko in that deck.
That's true as well. But yeah, so I mean, it's a 3 mana Planeswalker. You can play it on turn 2 off of a Birds of Paradise or something. It doesn't really do
Goose.
much the turn you play it.
Or Noble Hierarch.
But the fact that it pluses up to, so you can also play this Goose. It's a new card.
We'll talk about that in a second, but let's keep talking about Oko. 'Cause
Yeah.
There's a lot to say there.
Yeah.
I derailed Michael. So basically, things to be aware of is it does let you put threat on your opponent. It's a 3 mana thing that comes down with, and then pluses to 6 loyalty. So it's like very difficult to kind of murder this character. Like when you look at powerful 3 mana walkers previously, a lot of the ones that sometimes go under the radar are ones that come down and then are really hard to deal with. And jumping up to 6 loyalty the turn it comes into play is really hard to deal with. The one thing to definitely pay attention to also is that food, life gain is bad when the only thing you're doing is life gain. Life gain isn't bad when accidentally this thing that's doing powerful things also gains you life. It's the reason lifelink is such a powerful mechanic, because it's doing damage, it's causing things, and you're just happening to like run away from your opponent being able to kill you. So the fact that this is going to do things like, you know, get rid of creature abilities that you're afraid of or artifact abilities you don't want to deal with, create creatures that can start putting pressure on your opponent as 3/3s, and eventually maybe even steal like their Stoneforge Berserker. It steals the Batterspall Germ token, right? Because it's a it's toughness. It's toughness. Steal things like art.
It's power 3 or less.
You steal a artifact or just creature 3 or less.
A creature with a power 3 or less.
Okay, so stealing somewhat relevant creatures in Modern, there were a bunch of ones with power 3 or less.
I mean, you can. It's cool that you can just like steal a thing in the ice or steal an Arclight Phoenix.
Right.
Or
Also, if you have a blocker, you can turn one of their things into an elk and then steal the elk.
Correct. Yes.
Like if they have a creature that's threatening, like they have a 4/5 Tarmogoyf or something, and you have an X4 creature, I don't know, maybe you have your own Tarmogoyf, and you're like, I'm just going to turn that into a 3/3. It can't profitably attack now, but then I can just steal it the next turn.
Right. So it has that ability, and in the meantime, you're making a bunch of food, and then once you have enough mana, you can just start spending it to gain life, putting you out of damage range.
Right. So yeah, I was saying that like the food isn't relevant when you give it to your opponent, because chances are you're playing in this in a deck where you do not care much about your opponent's life total. But your opponent might be playing a deck where they do care about your life total. Right. And there's a lot of games where you find you're up against burn, you expend all your resources, and you're down to like 6 life. And then they like top deck a couple bolts in a row and you're dead. And with these cards, like you can then start gaining the life back slowly after you stabilize, and then you don't die.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot about how, one, I mean, this guy seems really good against burn, obviously, because he's just making counters to lightning bolts and lava spikes every turn.
Right.
And he himself will eat 2 lava spikes or 2 lightning bolts to die. But a thing I'm also really excited about Oko is in a snow deck, because he's in the right colors to play the Coatl, who's already great. But going like being able to turn your Arkham's Astrolabes into 3/3s when you don't need the mana washing anymore.
Yeah.
It seems like super.
You can
relevant.
trade an Astrolabe for something too, instead of a food.
Yep.
Right. Like an Astrolabe is another irrelevant permanent that works well with Oko.
And I do think, this is something we're going to get really into as part of the conversation. And it's something we're seeing here is because Arena is now such a big part of Magic, and because one of the most played versions of Arena is Best of One, to the extent that we consider doing a podcast just about Best of One Magic games, the cards that Wizards and the mechanics Wizards seems to be focusing on moving forward definitely seem to be cards that, like, you don't have sideboards in Best of One. You don't have the option to be like, oh, I need something to hate artifacts, or I need life gain to fight against burn decks or aggressive decks. There's going to be more cards being printed that are more versatile with a little bit lower like basic power level, like charms, etc. And you've seen that kind of everywhere, where they've realized that these are the type of things that are really cool. They can do a lot of them. So this is a card that's just inherently powerful, but then also is accidentally a sideboard card, right? But you can main deck this sideboard card. So
yeah, I mean, it's not quite effective enough of a bullet to be in your sideboard. Like it's not like a total burn hate card like Cerulean Drake or something with protection from red. It's like, it's more of a card that you play main deck that shores up your burn matchup, but does other things.
And I think that's healthier often for gameplay against those types of decks, right? When you have like a way to just like mediocrely deal with Dredge in your main deck in game 1, that makes that gameplay more fun, right? One of the reasons,
than just boarding into Rest in Peace and hoping you draw it, and then with games where you draw it, you win. Games where you don't draw it, you lose. Which is what a lot of people's big complaint about Modern is, that there are these incredibly powerful sideboard cards that just make things so lopsided that like every game is just a slaughter.
Well, and then on top of that, you also have the issue that you have a lot of just decks that are out there that are so linear that need very specific hate to be able to fight, and like no hate has really existed most of in the past. Like Graveyard has just been like, this is really good against graveyards, it's bad otherwise, don't play it unless you have to kill a graveyard. Now they're leaning towards, oh, this card is decent in the main deck and is a card you would play, plus burn has a worse matchup,
and
plus
like
you can interact with the graveyard a little bit more directly.
Scavenging Ooze is a great card like this, right, where it's like totally main deckable and it does a lot even if you're not playing against a deck that cares about your life total or a deck that's using their graveyard. But the fact that you can eat up somebody's graveyard and the fact that you can gain a little bit of extra life, both like create some gameplay decisions in game one that aren't just like, yes, I folded to dredge because I'm playing a mid-range deck.
Right. The format of I lose game one because I'm playing a combo deck that I don't have the right answers for, and then I win game 2 and 3 because I got the right hate for it and I drew it, is not as fun as, oh, my deck just naturally interacts with this deck strategy, and that deck strategy is built to be able to deal with people interacting with it, and so we're having games that my decisions and their decisions affect who wins. And that's kind of what you want from Magic, and why, I mean, we are going to have conversations in general forever, probably, hopefully, about how Stoneforge Mystic and Wrenn and 6 being these very powerful, ubiquitous cards have been added to Modern, but I think for a net positive because now more interaction is happening. These are things that stuff is happening in play. It's not I cheated an 8/8 trample into play on turn 2. You don't deal with it.
I will say that Wrenn and 6 in particular pushes out a lot of X1 creatures. Not that I think there are a ton of X1 creatures that are even that great, but I feel like cards like Dark Confidant are really going to plummet in popularity, and probably similar cards, because the more popular Wrenn and 6 gets, the more like...
But that's true of like any answer card, right? Like Lightning Bolt being ubiquitous makes it so
sure.
that
I mean,
X4
Fatal
are more
Push
played.
totally warped the metagame away from Infect and decks like that, because it was like, how many more decks are now getting access to a 1-mana removal spell?
Correct.
And how many decks that were playing 1-mana removal spells now gets to play 6 to 8 instead of 4?
One other thing that I like is, like you're saying about it being a versatile main deck, like so many of the sideboard cards that are relevant in Modern are artifacts. And so the fact that if you get Oko down on turn 2 or 3, then now your opponent can't profitably Karn lock you with Mycosynth Lattice. Because unless they could kill Oko, you can just turn the Lattice into a 3/3 when you get your turn back.
Yeah.
The biggest answer with Oko
Or you
is
can get through Ensnaring Bridge if you're playing an Oko beady deck. You know?
I guess the two biggest problems with Oko. The first one, it's blue-green. I mean, we've talked about this on the podcast. Historically, blue-green has had problems getting footing. Now that's less true. We have the snake. We have other things that are making it a more profitable color combo. The other issue, which is more relevant, I think, is how is it proactive enough, right? Like, you know, it's if you played Oko and your opponent just ignores it, you've wasted 3 mana on a thing that really isn't doing a whole lot and is working really hard just to do a little. So I think it's just on the line. I don't think it's like this is a Modern staple. We're going to see this seeing play tomorrow. But I do think, and I want to get into food in general after this, but I do think that it definitely has potential. It's like has a lot of things that are working for it. It's a really hard to deal with 3-mana Planeswalker that does have relevance. It does have a lot of things that it answers, and it shores up bad matchups for decks against aggressive decks that it could be relevant.
I think just a 3-mana Planeswalker is pretty much always going to be worth talking about in Modern, unless it's like some of the bad Uncommon War of the Spark Planeswalkers, and even some of those are surprisingly, you know, you see Dovin every once in a while around. And
I will say that I knew that Oko dealt with Batterskull, and I forgot how it was. It pluses to get rid of Batterskull.
Yeah, you turn the Batterskull into a 3/3 with no abilities, and they can't return it to their hand. It's just stuck. It comes unattached from the germ. The germ dies.
Yep, it's just a 3/3 elk that they now have that doesn't have lifelink, and you can deal with in infinite ways. So that I think just that alone makes Oko just the ability to basically kill equipment by making them into 3/3 dudes.
Yeah, I mean, you just have to manage the 3/3s, right? Because if you just play Oko, you plus turn something into a 3/3, they hit Oko down to 2. He now like isn't going to do that much. He's just going to like make a food. Oh no, I died. Like you need to defend him a little bit, like many Planeswalkers.
Batterskull or an equipment, I think, because
you're not killing it. You're giving them a 3/3. I mean, if they're pressuring your life total at this point, you spent 3 mana to turn their 4/4 into a 3/3, and then you take 3 damage. Like,
right, but if Oko's staying alive, then you gain food. If not, he's also fogging that 3 damage.
Yeah. No, I mean, don't get me wrong. I think Oko's good, but I wouldn't say that it's just +1 destroy target creature artifact, right? Like,
sure,
there's a big downside.
Yeah.
And there's a reason why Beast Within has not been like much more played outside of weird decks like Living End or whatever.
I think this is almost a strict upgrade to Beast Within in the decks that can play it. Not a strict upgrade. That's not totally true because it can't kill land and other things, I guess. But it does a lot more than Beast Within does generally because it can make your own thing into a threat multiple times.
I agree that it is often better than Beast Within. Not killing enchantments and not killing lands, I think, is rough. But yeah,
sure. All right. So on to food. There's a goose. That's the other big food card, really, so far.
Yep. It is a 1-mana 0/2 that when it enters the battlefield, 0/2 flying for 1 green. When it enters the battlefield, you get a food. You can... I should just read the card because...
I have it right here. Forget. 1 green mana, 0/2 bird, Gilded Goose. Flying. When Gilded Goose enters the battlefield, create a food token. We've already talked about that. You may tap it and pay 1 and a green to create a second food token. or any amount of food, you can tap it, so you can just keep making food tokens. Or you can tap it and sacrifice a food to add 1 mana of any color. So for 1 mana, you get a 1-turn Bird of Paradise. That's where it kind of starts. You can then, if you can have other ways to make food, for instance, if you spend that food and tap it to play Oko on turn 2, you now have just Birds of Paradise and Oko hanging out, gaining loyalty. Or you can tap it to make food later if you need a mana fix, or you just have extra mana you want to basically save for turns later. And I'm assuming we will see more of them. There are other cards that make food that then the bird can take advantage of. There can be a food tribal deck, which I'm excited to play on Arena at least.
Yeah, I think that to me sounds like a good standard or brawl deck. I feel like with the existence of Birds of Paradise and this being like a pretty obviously worse Birds of Paradise, it's not really going to make it in Modern, especially because not only do we have access to Birds of Paradise in Modern, we also have Noble Hierarch and Elvish Mystic and Llanowar. We have so many 1-mana dorks that are more consistent.
I think the main 2 features of it just the main feature of it that would make it worth it is if there is enough pushed food to have Modern care about it as a thing that you're trying to do. And
sure.
Then I don't, and that because you can use it to make food, right?
I mean, that's the thing. So yes, this card is a better top deck than Birds of Paradise because later in the game you have 5 mana or so. You top deck a Birds of Paradise. It's basically like top decking a land. You just play it. It doesn't do anything. Maybe it's going to chump block. You don't need the mana anymore.
Stabilizing by gaining you life.
But this guy, this comes in with a food token. It can then make more food tokens if you're flooded out, and maybe like gain you a little bit of life until you can draw a collected company or whatever and get back in the game.
And I think it's also relevant that we were just talking about Wrenn and 6, and so it having 2 toughness is relevant if food becomes a relevant mechanic, if there's enough food. Like a lot of people are speculating that food is going to be sort of like a fixed energy, because obviously there are other cards that aren't necessarily Modern staples, but there are other cards that use food to do something other than gain you life. So if there is enough food to make a food deck possibly relevant in Modern, it's not irrelevant to have a 1-mana dork that can't be sniped by Wrenn and 6 if you're on the draw.
And I also think that's just relevant in general. Having a Birds of Paradise, if you really just need in those early turns to be able to get stuff on turn 3, having a Birds of Paradise that Wrenn and 6 can't kill is not irrelevant. I do think a 0-2 toughness creature is something to be paying attention to. Added to the fact that it has that late game stabilization.
And it does still have flying, so you can play it in the deck with your Stoneforge Mystic and put a sword on it or a Battered Skull or whatever, or you can pump it with Gavany Township, or you can attack when you have a Noble Hierarch out and get through blockers. I mean, it does an okay Birds of Paradise impression. I just think that like Birds of Paradise is at its best when you like play it on turn 1, you tap it for mana on turn 2, you tap it for mana on turn 3, you tap it for mana on turn 4, and then it's basically blank at that point, but hopefully it's generated enough mana that you're way ahead. And this card doesn't do that. It does something that I think is much worse.
Sure.
But I do think that what it does is not strictly worse than Birds. Obviously, like I said, it's a better top deck. It dies to less stuff because of the extra toughness. Sometimes...
And yes, the best situation is when Birds does something turn 1, turn 2, turn 3, but there are a lot of situations where it does something turn 1, you play it on turn 1, you get something on turn 3, and then it's relevant from that point is mostly just a tap to be able to play... Convoke, tutor, name is Court of Calling, right? Like, and this bird can tap for Court of Calling just as well as a Birds of Paradise. So,
I guess I just think that, like, especially in general in Modern, but also especially with the London Mulligan, you are like kind of building your deck to enable nut draws because like the format can be pretty fast, and if you a lot of the time with these like
but this does
Birds of Paradise decks, you're
right? Like you still get your turn 3 amazing. I have 3 mana, but yes, I
turn
agree.
Turn 2 get 3 mana.
Yeah. So otherwise, food. I mean, we don't have a ton of cards previewed yet, so I don't want to get too into it. Obviously, by the time this episode comes out tomorrow and then Saturday, if you're watching the video, there's going to be more. And so if there's dope food tribal in the horizon, I do think though between this and Oko, I can imagine us seeing food. I'm excited to play with food.
We'll probably talk more about food before the set comes out, right. I'm sure.
There's enough food cards already spoiled that like food is doing interesting things. So it's got an interesting floor so far, and so it has an exciting potential ceiling.
Correct.
Depending on what they print.
And it's kind of been true of all these artifact token mechanics, right? Like Treasures was really exciting. Hasn't seen a ton of play in Water, but it has seen some play. Same as Clue tokens, right? Both of them had these like really cool, interesting ways to play with them. And I think every time they come out with it, they're learning that players like them, so they can lean into it a little bit more as a play mechanic. Then the other main mechanic I want to talk about today, but we have other stuff to talk about past that, is the adventure card type, which is they are creatures. They have a regular converted mana cost, power and toughness, and ability, text, but in the bottom left-hand corner, there's a little bit extra window that has a different name, a different converted mana cost, or mana cost in general. It is a sorcery, and I'm assuming there will be instant ones.
There are
instant ones.
We've seen some instants.
An instant, sorcery and instant, and then it's a sorcery instant type adventure, and then it's another ability. Now, how does that work?
Yeah, so these creatures, you can play them from your hand as a creature. They just do their thing. So, for example, I'm looking at Animating Fairy, which is a 2 and a blue for a 2/2 flying. You may play it for 2 and a blue as a 2/2 flying if you want from your hand. Easy, done. If you would like to send it on an adventure, you can play the sorcery adventure Bring to Life, which also costs 2 and a blue. Target non-creature artifact you control becomes a 0/0 artifact creature. Put 4 +1/+1 counters on it. So you would cast that sorcery, and then as it resolves, and it has to resolve, so if your opponent counters it, no
right
dice.
to the graveyard.
Yep. But if it resolves, then you exile Animating Fairy, and you can now cast it as a 2 and a blue 2/2 flying, for example.
Now, Mike, while it's on the stack, if I'm casting Bring to Life, is it a sorcery on the state? Can it be negated, or is it a creature?
It is a sorcery. You can negate it, and it will be countered because it is not a creature.
So in many ways, this is a way to do creature split cards, right? It's a little bit more closer to Kicker in many ways, but you have the choice of either playing this creature as is or playing the Kicker version that lets you kind of exile it, draw the creature card, and be able to play that later.
And there are some creatures that it looks a little bit more like Kicker because they have a very cheap adventure or a very cheap converted mana cost. So, for examul
Lovestruck Beast is for 1 green mana. You can make a 1/1 white human creature. We'll be referring to her as Belle for the rest of time. Put that in play. He then gets exiled, and then for 3 mana, 2 and a green, you can play a 5/5 that cannot attack unless you are also control a 1/1.
Right.
Always known as Belle.
So this guy often is just going to be played as a 4 mana 1/1 and a 5/5. And then I was thinking actually when I said it was of Embereth Shieldbreaker, which is 1 red sorcery, destroy target artifact, and then it's a 2 mana 2/1. So a lot of the time you're just going to wait until they play an artifact that you want to destroy, then you pay 3 mana, you blow it up, you get a 2/1. But the fact that it gives you flexibility, you can spend your mana on something else and then pay 1 mana to blow up their artifact, and you basically draw a 2/1. I mean, there's some cute stuff with adventure.
It's a lot of. In reality, it's a bunch of cards that say cantrip draw this creature, right? Like that's kind of ends up being what it is. Where if you would be playing that effect, if it said draw a card and that card is guaranteed not going to be a relevant creature of some type, then that card becomes really playable. And this is kind of going back to what we were talking about before, right? Where Wizards is working to create effects that are pseudo sideboard cards that you can play in your main deck. The artifact one you mentioned is a great example where, and this is more unlimited and standard, but mono red would play a 2/1 for 2 that sometimes you just has destroy target artifact attached.
Maybe there have to be some relevant artifacts to want to play that main deck, but it's a little bit more main deckable.
Sure.
And you know, I think it's interesting because some of these are actually more like a bonus. Like there's a 1/1 Death Touch for 1, which is like a good limited card, but it has 3 mana instant adventure Profane Insight. You draw a card and lose 1 life. So it's like a 1 mana 1/1 Death Touch, which is already playable, and that's probably you're going to play it most of the time. But if you got some extra mana, you can draw a card.
Well, in reality, it's almost 3 mana, draw 2 cards, lose 1 life. Because for 3 mana, you draw a card, you then draw this card into the exile zone, and then one of the cards you drew is just a 1/1 Death Touch for 1, which has been playable in every limited format I've ever played.
And it's relevantly a zombie and a knight.
Yes.
So it has 2 relevant creature types as well.
And we are, I believe, confirmed that Knight Tribal is a theme of this set.
We're super confirmed.
Super confirmed.
Yeah,
There's
so
an
they
entire
released
Knight Brawl set.
Foulmire Knight is the
So they have Brawl pre-con decks, which I think we mentioned previously at the Comic-Con announcements when they first announced they were doing these. But the Brawl pre-cons are up on Arena right now until September 9th. So today, with this big announcement, they put the Brawl deck pre-cons on Arena, and you can play Brawl on Arena right now, which is cool. So you're playing with these pre-cons, and that's where a lot of these spoilers have come from. One of them is a Knight Tribal deck. And there actually is one card that I think is going to be interesting, at least for casual Modern, out of the Knight Tribal deck, and I'm trying to find it. It's the big artifact. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Is it the Circle of Loyalty?
Circle of Loyalty, yes. The Circle of Loyalty is a 6-mana legendary artifact, which importantly costs 1 less to cast for each knight you control. So if it was just 6 mana, I think it'd be terrible. Creatures you control get +1/+1. So it's an anthem for everyone, not just knights. Whenever you cast a legendary spell, create a 2/2 white knight creature token with vigilance, and you can pay 4 mana and tap it to create a 2/2 white knight creature token with vigilance. So it does a lot. The fact that it gives you a discount means that you can go like turn 1 knight, turn 2 knight, turn 3 knight, and then you can play this on turn 4 for 3. Or if one of your knights died for 4.
Or if you have a card that makes 2 knight tokens for somewhere around 3 mana, that's an enchantment that
History of Benalia?
Maybe gives them +2/+1 on the 3rd turn.
That is also true. This card's very good with History of Benalia. But yeah, I mean, I think that like Knight Tribal has never quite made it in Modern, but I know that because Knight Exemplar is very powerful and History of Benalia is very powerful, there are like incentives to go there. There's also a 1-drop Knight in this set that is like, if you are playing Knight Tribal, I think is like a must include. It's a 1 mana. Yeah, it's a 1 mana 2/1. When it dies, you put a +1/+1 counter on target knight you control. And like 1 mana 2/1 is always like, well, in my aggro deck, maybe I'll play it. The fact that this one has upside and irrelevant creature type, I think gives it enough of a push to like, play it with your Knight Exemplar and your History of Benalia. You got plenty of good 2-mana knights and 3-mana knights. And then this card is kind of the card that goes over the top. Now, I will say, I think it gets a lot worse if you don't have a lot of legendary creatures. But I'm hoping that over the course of the spoiler season, we'll see some legendary knights. That's what you want, right? You want some like Knights of the Round Table caliber knights.
And in Modern, there are quite a bit of 1 mana. Like, I don't know if this he's playing this deck, but there's Dauntless Bodyguard is a card that is a knight.
If you're playing a Knight Tribal deck in Modern, I think you're playing it.
I think
Knight of the Wayfarer.
I think Knight of the White Orchid is a good 2-mana
Knight of the White Orchid, yeah.
But one thing that's also notable that was spoiled is there is a Merfolk Mistbinder for knights. It costs a red and a white for Inspiring Veteran, which is a human knight 2/2. Other knights you control get +1/+1. And Merfolk Mistbinder sees play in the fish decks, so I would imagine if the knight deck and the Knight deck also got a tri-land that enters the battlefield untapped. That is also relevant.
Right, and so they have their own tri-land for Mardu colors. You also can do the Cavern of Souls, Ancient Ziggurat, Unknown Shores, not Unknown Shores.
Unclaimed Territory.
Unclaimed Territory. I'm supposed to be the one who knows card names. And
that's why you guys have a producer, right?
And you can play, a bunch of these multicolored dual lands to play a 3-color tribal deck if it's worth it. I think that, depending on what we see, you might be able to get away with just black-white. Whoa. That is also a knight that is green. So if you're playing these, multi-lands, you can cast it. You can't cast it off the Knight tri-land. But
people listening can't hear this, but I'm holding up our giant cutout of Knight of Autumn.
And also Knight of the Reliquary. If you're in the green, in Dem Green Knights.
I think it's really easy to get choked on 3s in a Knight deck. So you would have to decide which 3s you want to play. And I think Knight of Autumn in particular probably goes in the sideboard. But
but they're all relevant knights, right? And I think, yes, you could say you get choked on colors. You do definitely get choked on 3 mana. There's a lot of 3 mana cards that you want to play in knights, but I think you just described a 5-color mana base with that being a tri-land. So I think there's definitely an argument for. There's a lot of powerful knights, and there's now going to be a push set that doesn't, and that's like Spirits just needed Innistrad, and then it went from Shadows over Innistrad, it went from being a not playable tribe to a playable tribe. So if there's enough incentives,
and they got a 2-mana Lord since Supreme Phantom. I think that's when they really took off, is when Supreme Phantom got printed.
As long as you're playing red and white, so theoretically there could be this Mardu colored Knight deck, or if there's enough spice in green and less in black, then we could see a Naya colored, or like you said, because we have the Ziggurat and the Unclaimed Territory, it could just be a 5-color best of the best.
Right, and there's definitely different directions to go. So that's exciting. By the way, Seb McKinnon's art is always the best.
Yeah, it's really well suited to this set too.
Order of Midnight is also a human knight, 2 mana 2/2. You can use the After Fate.
It has flying and can't block.
It has flying and can't block. It's a 2-mana 2/2 human knight with amazing artwork, flying on a raven, and you may have it go on an adventure for 1 and a black to return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. Sorry, I just really wanted to talk about how cool this art is because it's really good.
Well, but it's also it's also
relevant
nice
to
that
what we
it's a flying gravedigger in this creature type. A gravedigger that you can amortize over 2 turns, which is
right. And I think
bad.
a lot of the time in a night deck in standard or limited, which is where I kind of expect this to get played, to be honest. But it's going to be, you're sometimes just going to want a 2/2 flying for 2.
Yeah.
Which is good enough.
That's a pretty aggressive.
And then the fact that it does more than that and draws a card later in the game is pretty relevant.
And the other adventure knight I think is not irrelevant either. Smitten Swordmaster costs a black and 1. It's a 2/1 with lifelink, so not that bad. And then, but its adventure is 1 black, curry favor, sorcery. You gain X life, and each opponent loses X life, where X is the number of knights you control.
Yeah, I was watching a few different streamers play with the Brawl decks, and they had Knight of the Ebon Legion out, and they used that card when they couldn't get through in combat to deal the 3 to them, so that Knight of the Ebon Legion got a counter on their end step, and then the counter allowed them to punch through the next turn because they just needed to be 1 power bigger.
So adamant is a key verb, like the key verbs before it. So it's not actually a keyword, but adamant, it means a spell has additional effects if 3 or more mana of the same color was spent to cast it.
Yeah, it's not always on creatures. So for example, there's Killing Fire for 2 and a red. It's an instant. Deal 3 damage to any target. If you paid 3 or more red mana to cast this spell, it deals 4 damage to that target instead. I will say that mana is good enough in Modern that like you can be playing a 2 or even 3 color deck and easily get these adamant things. So I think it's something to keep an eye on. I don't think we've seen anything yet that really makes sense for Modern, but there's potential there because the mana bases are so good. These are cards that are probably going to be pushed because they expect there to be a big deck building constraint on it, but in Modern we're casting cryptic commands, so it's not really a constraint for us at all.
Yeah, I think if that's really what you need to accomplish, you can just like it does have some restraints. For instance, if you want to play like Kiki Jiki in a blue-white control or a blue-white-red control deck that goes infinite with Resto Angel, you have to warp your mana base to accomplish
Totally.
it. But there's also filter lands that help you accomplish it. There's ways to do it.
What I mean is like, yes, you will have to warp your mana base, and it will be worse than a typical Jeskai deck with no Kiki Jiki in it or no adamant cards. But like, it's not going to be that much worse. It's going to be playable. If there's a card that is good enough, then we can make it work. There isn't one yet. They're all just kind of like medium creatures that come in with a +1/+1 counter, or this burn spell that's like a 3 mana 3 damage or a 3 mana 4 damage. Doesn't quite cut it in Modern. No flame javelin getting played. So. But we'll see if there's a pushed enough adamant card. I think it's definitely something that's castable in Modern in a lot of decks, and so we'll see where it goes.
Yeah, and I think we have a lot of time to be able to see what that card
Totally.
looks like. So that does bring us to the next kind of part of the episode I want to talk about, which was the other sets that were previewed for the rest of the year. Before we get into that, I do want to say, make sure to follow us on Patreon. Once again, you could be the 69th person. It would be very nice of you to do that.
Nice.
And also our sister podcast.
Our sister podcast, The Command Zone. Jimmy and Josh do Commander content every week. They have game nights. They do awesome content.
They consulted on these Brawl decks.
And so you should definitely go check them out. They are awesome. Their show is really great.
Yep.
Can I give a quick shout out?
Marshall has a shout out.
So I was not here last week when you guys got to talk about the bannings and unbannings, which is super exciting. I haven't even gotten to listen to the episode, so I'm excited to hear what you guys think about Faithless Looting being banned. But I was gone to Burning Man, and as I had mentioned on the previous podcast, I participated in a Conspiracy 1 draft out at the Enchanted Booty Forest, and we had a couple of people come by, fans of the show, who had heard about it.
Oh, really?
And specifically came out asking, like, hey, is Marshall here?
Oh, awesome.
So shout out to Jackson. Jackson was the only one whose name I remember, but Jackson came out and played some games with us, and he was a pretty cool dude. So thank you, Jackson, for coming out and drafting.
Yeah.
And making me feel like I'm somehow important to Magic.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any last things so far on the last set? I say color artifacts is cool.
I think you were leading into Theros pretty well. I think we should move on to Theros.
Cool. Theros. So one thing about Adamant, a mechanic that I learned about while we were recording this episode, because every card that has it is in Japanese. is really a big plant for the fact that the next set we're going to is Theros. And if you guys don't know this, the mechanic Devotion is probably one of the 3 main featured pieces of Theros. The other ones being
Constellation.
Well, no, I would say because Constellation was only in Journey of the Next. I think Constellation comes back. I'm hoping that was my favorite.
I assume we're going to get Constellation and Devotion probably.
Constellation and Devotion are my like high picks. I have like Monstrous around there. I could see it not coming back until the next set because we're going to a monster theme set, which we'll talk about in a second.
Or Heroic.
But Heroic could come back. I hate it. I hate the mechanic, and they have so. many
to
pieces.
me, Heroic defines Theros more than anything else except maybe enchantment creatures.
No, Devotion, like both from a competitive play.
I'm just saying for me.
Sure.
For me, I think enchantment creatures, Heroic, and then Devotion.
Yeah.
Personally.
Well, for sure there'll be enchantment creatures. I think there's no chance that there's not an enchantment creature. If
Might not be Bestow because they kind of like toned down Bestow in favor of Constellation at the end of the block anyway, so they might continue on that path. But.
And I think Bestow had a reaction. The reaction to Bestow mechanic, which was basically you could play creatures that you had as auras instead of enchantments, was a very difficult to kind of grok mechanic in general.
They sort of tapped it out. Like pretty much every keyword mechanic got a Bestow creature.
Yeah, and even non-keyworded mechanics like the Ophidian ability and like
the only thing that I wish there was is that I wish Chromanticore was a legendary creature. But otherwise, yeah, I agree. I think the world thinks that Chromanticore should have been a legendary creature. And if someone walked up to me with a Chromanticore commander deck and was like, "Here, I'm gonna play with this as my commander," I'd be like, "Okay, you do you, buddy."
Yeah. So Theros Devotion I think is the most modern playable mechanic though. Heroic is just not very good. You have to target your own creatures with spells, which usually sucks. Enchantment creatures don't really make it. I mean, like Eidolon of Rhetoric, I guess, is playable, but not because it's an enchantment, just because it is.
Eidolon of the Great Rebel is the most
Eidolon of the Great Rebel,
creature.
but even then, like that could have just been a creature that wasn't an enchantment, right?
Sure, yeah. The enchantment feature on enchantment creatures.
It's a creature that you can disenchant.
But on the other hand, that could start to mean anything, and there are ones that are interesting. There's the Constellation green enchantment that like gives +X equal to how many creatures are in your graveyard if an enchantment comes into play. That like in standard I had a pretty powerful deck and it's inexpensive, does the thing when it enters play because that's how Constellation works. There's the one that draws you cards, there's Doomwake Giant. I think there's a lot to play in that space. Like this is another thing like I mentioned Spirits where like you just need enough sets that come out that are modern that enchantment focused.
Sure.
For those enchantment creatures from back in the day to be relevant, but for them to be relevant moving forward.
But what I'm saying is I think that at a base level Devotion is the most exciting for a modern player because it's the mechanic that has currently made the biggest impact on modern from Theros.
Yeah. It's also a relevant plant in this set that there is a sub-theme that's shown in the Esper Brawl deck of keying off when artifacts and enchantments.
Yeah.
So there's this idea that there are some people who are like mystics who are making
or
artifacts
warlocks.
and enchantments. Or maybe they're warlocks.
Oh, Marshall does not like the warlock
calling it out.
creature
I
keyword.
do not like the
more
warlock
creature keywords.
No, I like less creature types. The more you dilute the creature type base, besides Magic already has plenty of warlocks, and they're all either shamans or wizards. So and now they're going to invent a new creature type, and now it's like, what are going to happen to all those old warlocks?
All right, so warlocks are in the game. The warlock people are happy.
Warlocks,
these two are not happy.
Warlocks are in the game. If you want to know why we're not happy, you should listen. You should become a patron because I've just cut out all of the stuff. So
I'm
go listen to go listen to the raw extended version of this episode where me and Michael Grothy voice our concern about the warlock creature type. But you have to sign up for Patreon. Go be our 69th patron.
That's true. Witch's Cottage. Also, just like the video. There's a like button. Press it. Really appreciated. Cool. We're talking about future sets, and then we got into an hour-long.
We're talking about Theros.
So Theros, Devotion's dope. Really excited. Was problematic in standard. I think maybe they've learned how to fix it. There are a lot of modern-based mechanic that are kind of close. Like Grey Merchant has tried to see play. Mono Green Devotion is a deck that like every first person who plays Modern plays.
Nykthos is a popular modern card.
Yeah, but you can
in these green decks and
big green spells like
I've seen also like white Devotion with Nykthos or black Devotion with Nykthos. Like Nykthos is flexible enough that it sees some play. It's cool card.
And Theros and Ravnica could get along really well because hybrid is a mechanic that they take advantage of. And then we've already gotten hybrid cards previewed in the Eldraine. There's already 2.
Right. There's 2 quad hybrid cards, which was not even something that was in Ravnica. Ravnica had triple hybrid cards, like Nightveil Spectre was the big one that got played in Standard. But this has a
Arcanist Owl, which is a bird artifact creature for blue-white ×4, and Fireborn Knight, which is a human knight ×4. We don't have to talk about them. Both of them are relatively just medium draft cards, but they're cards that, like...
Well, I think they could get played in Standard, potentially, in a Devotion deck. But, all these cards are moving in the direction of pushing Devotion, and I think many of them are meant for Standard, but given that we haven't seen the rest of the set or a single Devotion card, I think Devotion has potential.
Yeah, I think based on what we've seen as well, that the chances that something along the lines of... like there's a lot of weird cards in Standard right now with Heroic, right? Like without having seen the set itself,
it's like 2, I think.
There's 4, I thought. Maybe there's 2. But
maybe there's 2 that aren't playable. I don't know.
Yeah, it's like a 24 drop.
Oh, no, you're right. You're right. There's 3 because there's the enchantment that's like whenever you target your creature, and there's Gargos whenever you. So there's 4.
So they're like they've like kind of been hinting stuff on the edges. So it either feels to me that they're not going to include it, and they're just like they'll include it through Spirit, right? The way that like Tireless Tracker has landfall. That's not a land that it doesn't have the keyword ability, but
they made it do that because they put it into a format that had landfall in it, in the same way that they might print heroic analogs.
Correct.
Because they're going to do heroic,
right.
And they're going to want you to play these cards with the heroic cards.
Yeah, so it's possible to go either direction. Beyond that, I mean, Devotion and Constellation are the 2 that I really hope to be there. Enchantment creatures were for sure going to be there. The reason I do think Constellation is a little bit more likely from a flavor perspective is the set is about going to the underworld, and Constellation was a feature of like the land of gods, or the places that more godly things
when you
exist.
Journeyed into Nyx,
right.
is when you saw Constellation.
Yes, exactly. So it's very possible here. Elspeth is coming back. Excited. Next set that was previewed was the monster themed one that we don't know too much about, and I'm even forgetting what it's called. Ikora, which sounds like
Kiora, who it's called Ikora, like Land of Behemoths, which is interesting since we have Kiora Behemoth Beckoner.
Maybe
but
that's
we know she's
too similar though.
She's from Zendikar.
She's from Zendikar.
She was born on Zendikar. So
there's been some speculation that perhaps this world, I mean, certainly using the word behemoth and a name that sounds a little bit like her name, that this is definitely a place she's been
or will go
and
to.
Probably will be. We'll probably get a new Kiora card. And perhaps this is a world where she visited early on and is now revered as a god or something, and they decide to name their world after her.
She's not immortal. She's like a teenager, or not a teen. She's like a teenager compared to Soren, but she's like regular aged.
Regular aged.
She's not.
We
like
got a new term here
Soren,
on Masters of Modern.
Liliana, who like at one point
I think she's supposed to be relatively young. Based on her personality, I think she's probably supposed to be like in her 20s.
Yeah. When I say teenage,
in Merfolk years, disclaimer: I don't know how long Zendikar Merfolk live. Maybe in your 20s in Merfolk years is like she's 55, but I'm pretty sure that she's in her 20s.
I don't. Yeah.
Ikoria, layer of behemoths.
Yeah. The things we do know is that it is. Maro said this on the stream. It's a kind of a make your own monster theme.
Yeah,
set,
you'll be able to build your own monsters, and he said that will be a cool mechanic.
And he said it's a new mechanic. It is not a riff on host and augment.
It could still be a riff on. Oh, people did ask, and he said no.
People asked on his Tumblr, and he said it's a wholly new mechanic, and it's not. It's not a riff on host and augment.
What about meld?
No one asked specifically.
Okay, so
it could be meld.
Takes on meld. Said it first. Mar hasn't answered yet. Probably gonna say no to that later.
Meld sweet.
I love meld. But the other thing about it is that it is something that plays well with monsters that could be on Theros. Like one big theme of Theros was monsters were around. Going into the next set being like giant monsters. There's also some size matters cards from Ravnica block. Specifically Kiora is the one that's coming to mind at first. So that I think all plays into that. I'm excited. It's going to be cool. There's also going to be monsters on Eldraine. I don't know how you tribalize monsters other than size matters.
Yeah, I think size matters is the only real way to do it.
Yeah.
He says here on Blogatog, Ikoria Layer Behemoth. It's a monster world, and you're going to get a chance to play with and build your own monsters using the most ambitious mechanic we've made in years.
He likes to make statements like that. But
Augment and meld combined. It's meld cards, but half of them are one half and half of them are the other half, and you have to flip them together.
Yeah, I mean, knowing basically nothing about Ikoria, these is pretty baseless speculation, but the set after Ikoria is Zendikar Rising.
Incorrect.
Which we do know about that. Oh, it's core set.
Magic 2021.
Which is going to be a core set. You pretty much know what to expect. Teferi is the headliner.
Tezzeret.
No,
Teferi.
It's Teferi.
It's Teferi?
It's a
Oh,
Teferi.
I've been so wrong so long.
Yeah, you're really
Yeah.
wrong. It's
I thought it was
Teferi.
Tezzeret.
It's Teferi.
No.
It's Teferi,
I don't know
and
if that's
there's
more or less exciting.
it's Teferi, and I personally in Mark Rosewater had his State of Design 2019 article, which I've always found his State of Design articles to be really
Wait, when
interesting.
did it come out?
2 weeks ago.
Oh,
So
Cool.
so for anyone who doesn't, it's on the main Magic website, and he basically just does a review of how he thinks design went for the previous year.
there's like
And-
mistakes and strengths and goes through each thing.
And in
It's
general,
actually
he's-
one of the better articles he writes every
Yeah,
year.
and so in general, he was pretty positive on this past year, and I agree. I think this last year was really great for Magic. And one thing that I thought that was interesting that he talked about was regarding Core Set 2020. That one of the strengths they liked about it is that it was a much more robust, limited environment than core sets traditionally have been. That it played up a lot of mechanics, like a little bit of tribal, a lot of like last minute callbacks to dinosaurs and vampires. So they had a last hurrah in the sun. And so he said they'll definitely carry that forward going forward, but that there was a little bit less of a unifying theme, and that people were expecting a bit more of a unifying theme, which he's like, well, it's kind of hard to do with a core set, but maybe going forward, the Nicol Bolas theme of the previous core set had been a big thing. This one had a very slight Chandra theme.
She had 3 cards, then there was a rare that referenced her, and there were like a couple of commons, right? There was like Chandra's Outrage and Chandra's Embercat or something. Is that is that less than Bolas got? Yeah, the rare, the fluctuator.
But like Bolas
That's
had
more.
his like cycle of rares, that patient rebuilding, Apex of Power and stuff, and then he had like his brothers and sisters got new
That's
cards
true,
and
yeah.
stuff. So
they could have done more like stuff on Kaladesh. They could have yeah.
Yeah. So I'd be interested if this Teferi set, if it's like Nicol Bolas, because Teferi's a really interesting character if you've been playing Magic for a long time, but if you haven't, you maybe don't know Teferi's importance to the greater Magic storyline, or
That's
the whole
true.
thing
I
with
mean, if they-
phasing out Jam-Ura and
Yeah, there's so much more. Part of the issue with Chandra also, she's very color centric. Though they could have had a Pia and Kieran call back, or reprinted it, or had there's definitely things you could have done a little.
I mean,
bit
they
more.
could even have like a different Baral card or something,
Right,
just like
right.
relevant characters from her life.
and
They could have done a Jaya Ballard as Mother Luti or something, given her a legendary creature.
And yeah, going back to just looking at Teferi's life, there's a lot more because he's been a character
way
since
more.
1996.
yeah. So I'd be really excited if it's like Nicol Bolas, a survey of Teferi's life, that we could see him as a legendary creature and also as a planeswalker, and maybe see a bit more callbacks to his play in the invasion storyline.
In Teleria, where he was a student with Karn and Ugin and Yora, and yeah.
I will say though, and this is I guess something about Chandra, and then it's something I missed with the new Garrett card that was previewed. I'm really excited about just like planeswalkers that play more in the space of planeswalker tribal. Like the fact that Garrick has the cool, he makes 2 wolves, and then if they die, all Garricks get a loyalty counter. And then, Chandra has the the plus of giving all red planeswalkers a loyalty counter, and then we had Sarkon has all planeswalkers become dragons, which is the dopest one, I think, of these 3.
No argument here.
It's definitely a space I really like, and I think Red doing it makes the most sense to me. Garrick helping himself is fine, but like Red being the like, we love each other and are supportive part of the
I mean,
red
I could
pie
see
is
White
great.
doing that. Johnny has had a few cards that puts a counter on all your planeswalkers too, right?
White classically is the planeswalker tribal color, right? It's more that what would be the second best color at that, and it's green or red. I would assume it would be green, but I'd actually like more that it's red, because red just needs more stuff in its color pie, and it makes sense from a flavor perspective of like love and caring and wanting to support each other.
But yeah, so that's Core 2021, and then Zendikar is the fall set next year. So 1 year from now, we will be seeing Zendikar Rising previews.
Hashtag Hedron Bull hype. I need Nahiri and Sorin to fight each other. Get ready. If
They
you guys
always
have ever,
fight each
what
other.
is not what just get yeah, but they have to finish that fight. They fought once, twice, 3 times. A lady.
I mean, one of them is.
So the first time they were friends. That's the whole Zendikar plotline. Second time, when they actually fight, she gets mad at him because he wasn't helpful, and then he locks her into the Hell Vault.
Yeah.
Which is the onus for the plot of unlocking that Hell Vault during Innistrad block.
But yeah, many Sorin just like if he didn't like somebody, he just locked him in the Hell Vault.
Hell Vault.
Demon threatening humans that I need my family to eat, put him in the Hell Vault.
Yep,
so
easy.
there were a bunch of demons
Grizzle
in there. There were a bunch of nasties, and there was also Nahiri because he didn't like her.
And whoops, Avacyn. They got Avacyn back. That was the whole part of Avacyn restored. Then Nahiri gets out when Avacyn is restored. She then plots a bit, has Emrakul shows up, fights Sorin again, locks him into a brick of stone. That's fight number 2. Fight number 3 was, for some reason, they both show up at War of the Spark, and they're just like, screw this noise. Nicol Bolas can do whatever. I'm going to mess you up specifically. And then
one of us is going to be rare.
One of us is going to be rare, and one's going to be an uncommon. But now, time for the final showdown. I feel like the main plot point that has to do with Zendikar, other than it being rebuilt, which is boring, is like Sorin getting revenge for the fact that Nahiri dropped an Emrakul on his house. And
I mean, he dropped
you don't know the game
all
meme,
3 Eldrazi on her house.
That's true. I mean, I understand her revenge. I'm on Team Nahiri's side.
Same.
Hashtag Stoneforge team, I guess. I don't know. Come up with a good hashtag world. But hashtag Hedron Bull, them fighting. If you don't know the Clegane Bull meme from Game of Thrones, there's a video. Just imagine that, but with Sorin and Nahiri instead of those 2 brothers.
Yeah, I mean, so they've said that their biggest mistake with Battle for Zendikar was that it didn't really capture the heart of what Zendikar is. It was more an Eldrazi set, or Eldrazi block, and people were not as into that because people liked Zendikar, and they feel like they didn't see what they were expecting. So
they also did weird choices, right? Like Eldrazi was a very specific type of gameplay that was very beloved. Like that is a top 10 draft limited format for a lot of players, though it is much more of an advanced player set. The biggest issue more though is that they like went down the processor route, and then they went down to like the weird 5th, 6th color.
The color imbalance was the main problem with the sets. I would say, like, I thought processors were actually really fun to play with. The problem is if you were in green or white, your deck was probably terrible.
Right. And so the entire format was weird. And like,
but I think more like the draft format being sucky is something that they can fix, right? All they had to do was make the green and white cards a little bit better, and the draft format, it would have been a lot better. And, there are other slight things, but that's like tweaks. Like the overall thing was that it didn't feel like the set was taking place on Zendikar. People missed kind of the like adventurers going on quests and kind of encountering traps and allies banding together to form like an adventuring party. Like, Zendikar was kind of the like D&D adventure set, right? Where like it had traps that you could spring on your opponent, and it had allies, which were supposed to represent like different people coming together in an adventuring party and helping each other out and interacting with each other.
Which I think we're going to, in the new set, lean more into those D&D tropes more than anything.
Yeah, so that's what they have kind of hinted at by saying that that's what they really missed on Battle for Zendikar block, and so I think we're going to see that in Zendikar Rising. We're going to see kind of a return to adventure world.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's definitely going to... It's about it being rebuilt, but it's going to be about people kind of doing that cool D&D style game.
Yeah, and I think that it will be adventure world where there's Eldrazi, right? It's like you are adventuring in a dungeon and you're fighting, off some vampires or whatever, but then there's also some Eldrazi spawn that you have to fight that are left over or whatever, right? Like, I think that Eldrazi and adventure world can certainly mesh. It's just a question of, how they're going to do it.
Right. Well, and I would say one of the reasons I think BFZ was so badly responded to is the limited format was bad, but the thing that made the limited format fun at all, which was processing, was super parasitic. So then the construction version of those cards were also not good. Like at both ends of it, like for a set to be liked, you either need constructed to be fun off of it or limited to be fun off of it. If you get both,
Black-White Allies was also a fun archetype. It was like the only good white archetype, but
it didn't. I thought that only got good after Oath of the Gatewatch. Okay. All right.
You had a Drana's something or other. It was like at the beginning of your upkeep.
Oh, sure.
You drain them for 1, and it's a 2/2 flying for 3, which is like a great limited card on its own. But then you had like all this life gain synergy where it's like whenever you gain life, this gains death touch until end turn. Whenever you gain life, this gets +1/+1.
Tapped, you gain life off of it, right? Or untapped. Or I don't know. That was from Oath of the Gatewatch.
That's Oath of the Gatewatch.
Cool.
There was also a similar black-white deck in Oath of the Gatewatch, but it had the like tap 2 allies you control to do the thing, right? But it was fun even in Battle for Zendikar. It was like the one good wire archetype. I would say that the 2 most fun decks were like the cool Eldrazi processor decks and the black-white deck, and everything else was kind of...
Well, that was something also that I think I remember they did weird, is that they like took allies into a direction that was like, oh, they're just generically good but boring together, versus the first set where like you actually had to go down that gameplay and have them synergize. allies.
Yeah, I think that was something that they felt was too parasitic, and they wanted allies to pump all of your creatures but still interact with each other a little bit. And I think they missed the mark, but only slightly. We'll see how they do it next time.
And it'll be interesting to see how it goes, and I'm excited for that, and as well as Nahiri and Soren fighting each other. I think that story thread is my favorite of the three main storylines that we've had in Magic. Has been the like I think my favorite story is Khan's Block, which is a part of that, which is then like Sarkhan going back in time to save Ugin, and then like the early Eldrazi storylines. And even all the Innistrad stuff is great. So like kind of that world is the stuff I like the most. I'm really excited for New Phyrexia too.
You're a big fan of Ugin, Soren, and Nahiri and their branching, intertwining storyline through the ages.
Yeah, I mean that branches a little bit into the regular storyline. Ugin's so attached to Nicol Bolas now.
Yeah, but that was kind of something that I guess it started in Khans, but like we didn't know how attached they were at that point. I don't know. I feel like that's something that's recent. I don't know. I mean, maybe they had that plan in Khans. I'm not sure, but
yeah, I mean, in Khans, all we knew is that Nicol Bolas killed Ugin.
Yeah,
and then we found out literally like the year that they killed Nicol Bolas.
Imprisoned Nicol Bolas.
In prison. We find out like in the core set right before that they're brothers, like in the story that is not even said really in the cards. And then the ending moment is like them just like hanging out in the prison. Yeah, I don't know. Moving on.
I am excited that much like how Avengers Endgame kind of closed the door on a chapter of the Marvel Universe and is like, okay, now we're going to move on to featuring these other heroes and like a new Avengers style build-up. I appreciate that Eldraine, like we've got Garruk, which is cool because we haven't seen that dude in a minute.
Since Magic 2013
or something?
No. So 2015.
So it's been a while since we saw Big Angry Garruk, and he totally fits here. Like this idea of this cursed hunter archetype works great on a fantasy plane. And then we have Oko, who's new and is interesting and feels like in an interesting, different place than the other blue-green planeswalkers.
Mm-hmm. And then Will and Kenrith.
And then Will and Rowan, who were specifically invented to show up in this set, but then seeded into Battle Bond as like a preview.
Yeah, they were like, the Battle Bond team was like asking the creative team, like, hey, we need 2 planeswalkers that it would make sense for them to have partner. And the creative team was like, we actually have twins that are in this other set. Do you want them?
Right. And we already have confirmed from Mark Rosewater that Will and Rowan share a card in this set.
And they share a spark. So between the two of them, they have 1 spark. We don't know exactly the mechanics of that, although the book's out. Maybe it explains it. I'm not sure. But that was one of the reasons they gave them partner, because they are intertwined in that way. And then also they share a card because they're intertwined in that way. So
and apparently, and this is just from people reading it and their responses so far, Will Kenrith specifically is like dope.
Yeah, I've heard really good things about the book.
Yeah, I've heard really good things.
I might pick it up. I didn't pick up War of the Spark because I heard medium things and I didn't want to struggle through it. But I heard good things about the book, so we'll see.
I'll do another audiobook. Audiobooks make it easiest for me. Readings for nerds. Listen to stuff like podcasts. Marshall gave me a dark stare. Reading's great. I love reading. Everyone should read more. But also listen to podcasts while driving, because you can't read while you're driving.
Yep. Listen to podcasts.
That's true.
Podcasts are good.
It's not safe. That's kind of all those previews, right? We didn't get anything else.
Yeah, we were going to maybe talk about post-ban list Modern, but there was too many announcements today to get there. So.
Yeah, literally because we had to delay the recording of the episode a day because Marshall was at Burning Man and holiday weekend and everything. We delayed just in time for Wizards to drop an entire set's worth of content.
more, tons of Eldraine stuff, plus the next 4 sets, plus
Brawl, like literally.
It was a big day. I'm glad we recorded today.
Yep. Same.
I have one piece of news that also came out today that I, as an environmentalist, am really excited about. Hasbro released a statement that they are planning on phasing out all plastic from their packaging by the end of 2022. And that includes polybags, shrink wrap, and things like Magic wrappers. So I'm excited to see what they're going to do with it. I personally think Magic, instead of doing the little cardboard boxes like they did for Modern Masters, I think they could go back and do the sort of wax paper packs like that baseball cards and stuff used to come in.
Sure.
We'll see what they do. I do think that with having 3 different types of booster pack of varying sizes means they are thinking about booster pack design anyway. So we'll see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
as-
it can get to the point where like draft packs are literally just like a box that has the 3-pack segmented, right? There's like definitely way if they're moving away from one pack services all audiences, then what that means can be totally different.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that's really exciting because every day, thousands and thousands of Magic packs are opened, and those little foil packs can't be recycled. So every single pack of Magic cards you've ever opened is out there somewhere still in the world.
Yeah.
Maybe in a fish's stomach.
Think about that.
Do we like fish? I do like eating. I like eating raw fish. That isn't, but not like cooked
That's a fish that you eat.
That's true. But I can
So
then see
maybe
if there's a pack in there and not eat it. It doesn't like, it's not like accidentally cooked in and I have to like eat it before I find the pack in there.
I don't think that's how it works.
I don't think that's how it works. I think the microplastics you can't see. Point is, Hasbro is making a commitment to eliminate plastic from their packaging, and I think that's great. Good job, Hasbro.
Yeah. All right. That's it for the episode. Make sure to follow us. I am at Kess Wiley.
At Dudard, D-U-D-A-R-D-D.
At Marsh Unfocused.
We are at the MMcast. You can follow the third host, Ben Bateman, at Ben Bateman Media, at Ben Bateman Media. We have a Facebook group. You should check it out. We have all of the social media things you should check out. Two most important ones, YouTube. If you're watching it right now, once again, hit subscribe, hit the bell button, hit the like button. Like button is actually more important than we thought, so double, triple up on that like button. And also make sure to check out our Patreon. The reason we're able to do video and have the cards in frame and everything that makes this podcast happen is because of our patrons. Thank you guys so much. Actually, a thing that we're supposed to be doing, and I am remembering to do, clicking on the Patreon button, gonna shout you out. Where are you at? Where are you at, patrons? Adam Hartman, Adam Olson, Adrian Camilleri, Ahmed Stem, Erzuka. Gonna go through those ones. Thank you guys so much. And if you donate to the Patreon, you get access to the raw video feeds and episode feeds. So you get all of the weird stuff that we think isn't really supposed to be in the main episode.
You get to hear a 30-minute discussion about who likes and does not like the Warlock creature type.
Yep, we get in depth on humans, the problematicness of how they get printed. There's a whole 30-minute conversation exclusive to Patreon. So check that out, patreon.com/theMMcast. Thank you guys so much. We'll see you guys Monday for our preview card. Get hyped. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for your attention. See you later, alligator.
This has been a production of Time Traveler Media, sending podcasts into the future.